What is going on, everyone? John Kelly here with FightNumbers.com, here to break down UFC Norfolk. We're in Norfolk, Virginia this week, coming off a fun week last week. I think, this one could arguably, you can make a case this one is actually going to be even more fun. We did have a decent amount of finishes last week, but this one, according to Vegas, is actually going to have potentially even more finishes, which I'm super excited about. And there's definitely a few up and coming prospects that I like. We have Brendan Allin Allen coming off a UFC debut submission victory. We have Sean Brady, a Philly guy, my boy, got to represent Philadelphia. He's coming off the decision win against Court McGee at UFC Boston. We have other. There's another up and comer that I like. We'll get to it later though. There's a lot of fun guys. We have Ian Kutalaba versus Magomed Ankalaev. That's going to be a fun one. That might be the people's main event champ this week, or the people's main event this week, in terms of entertainment. And then obviously we have the main event between Joseph Benavidez and Deiveson Figueredo. So a lot to get to this week. A lot of underdogs that I like this week. Last week, it was kind of similar to 2 weeks ago. I talked about I was on a lot of the right guys. I had some Jimmy Crute. He scored super well. I had some of the other guys that came through, and basically it came down to the last two fights. And once again, they just did not go my way, which is fine. That's MMA. It's super high variance. But at least we're giving ourselves chances, hoping to keep the good momentum going, moving forward to UFC Norfolk. If you're just joining us for the first time, basically I'm going to run through the entire UFC card, going to go fight by fight, go over each matchup, talk about how I see it playing out, give my official pick for each matchup. I'm going to talk about the betting values that I see in the current betting markets, some of my favorite bets that I like, along with my favorite Draftkings plays as well, and which fights that I think will score well in general, and then a little bit of tournament strategy at the end. If you have any questions, go ahead and get them in the chat, and I will address them as they come in. And then basically afterwards, we'll have the replay of the video, the podcast, all that good stuff at the end. We'll be up on fightnumbers.com. So definitely go ahead and check that out. All right. We can go ahead and get right into it now. First fight up on the card is the one that I was actually just talking about. It's going to be Sean Brady versus Ismail Nardiov. If you remember Nardiov, he's the guy who burned everybody against Chance Rencounter, but I was actually on Chance Rencounter during that fight. That was 2 fights ago for Nardiov. But basically, it showed, the holes in Nardiov's game. And he's coming in here as a minus 125 favorite to come back on Brady's plus 105. But it's crazy. The money's been coming in on Sean Brady all week. Nardiov opened up at minus 195, as you can see. Now bet all the way down to minus 125. This fight as a whole is minus 250 to go to decision. But I like Sean Brady here. Nardiov's good. He definitely has some powerful kicks, and he's a very talented striker, especially when he's at range. But like I said, Chance Rencounter really exposed him with the cardio. Rencounter basically out-wrestled and grappled him for 15 minutes. And towards the end of the second and early third round, the entire third round, he was really just gassed. He wasn't scrambling as well like he usually does. It was just, it showed that he's not like some, the Austrian wonder boy that everybody loves. It shows he is human and he does bleed. So now talking about Brady. So Brady, I mentioned he's a Philly guy, trains out of Henzo Gracie, BJJ in Philadelphia. He's a black belt in BJJ. He's 11-0 professionally, coming off the unanimous decision victory against Court McGee in his UFC debut that I hinted at earlier. He is a former Cage Fury champion, and I talked about it before during that Boston breakdown. One of the executives for the Cage Fury promotion basically said that he is the most talented fighter to ever come out of that promotion. And, I'm not going to say that he's a future world champion, but, I also wouldn't be completely shocked if maybe he starts getting that conversation, 2 years down the line. That's how good I think Sean Brady could be. He's a powerful striker. He has a very good counter left hand that he's always looking to use. You saw that quite a bit in the Court McGee fight. He actually sat down Court McGee with one of those big counter left hands. Like I said, he does have power. Along with that, he's strong. He's able to wrestle. And that's where I think he could have an advantage here if he decides to use it. I don't know if he will, because this could potentially just be a striking battle at range. And that's where I think this gets a little bit dicey, because I mentioned how good Nardiov is at range. He has those spinning wheel kicks. He has those powerful legs. That's where I think Brady could lose, is if he just decides to strike at range for 15 minutes against Nardiov. Then that's probably going to be either a close split decision or somebody's going to sleep. But where I think Brady could excel is using that grappling advantage. I think he could be the stronger wrestler. I know Nardiov's a good scrambler. He showed that off against his last three opponents, really. But I think Brady could be the stronger wrestler. He's definitely the better grappler, training out of a good camp. And I mentioned he's the black belt as well. So I'm actually on Brady in this matchup, just because I think he has more paths to victory, and that he could potentially submit Nardiov. He could win a decision if he's able to take him down and play the chance rank counter game, get his grappling going. Like I said, I'm just not super confident that he will. So that's why I think this line is about right, being Nardiov a small favorite. I think in terms of DraftKings, Nardiov's definitely more expensive. He's at 8.6K, I want to say. And that's where I definitely have more interest in Brady, because he's so cheap. We're getting automatic odds value at plus 105. He's only 7.6K. And even in the decision against Court McGee, he scored 110 points. He had one knockdown in that fight, two takedowns. He is capable wrestler. So I like Sean Brady here. I think getting plus money, I think the bet is great. I like to play on DraftKings quite a bit as well at 7.6K, but I'm not completely ignoring Nardiov. Even at 8.6, he's active enough. He could score in the mid 80s in a decision. And with his type of power in those legs and the spinning techniques, he does have the upside to finish Brady, although Brady has never been finished. So that's why I lean Brady. I just think he has more paths to victory. I think he's durable. And I just love the odds value and the cheap price on DraftKings. So I'm on Brady here. Brady by decision is the official pick. And that is pretty much it on that one. Next fight up on the card, Alan Cruz versus Spike Carlisle. This is another one. I'm on the dog here. Spoiler alert. I'm actually on Spike Carlisle, and I wasn't expecting to be. And maybe part of that is like because everybody's so obsessed with Alan Cruz coming off Dana White Contender Series. He had a flying knee knockout with 27 seconds left in the third round. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it was an absolutely beautiful knee, timed perfectly, super quick, super powerful, and landed perfectly. I mean, his opponent Stephen Wynn was like instantly out cold with that knee, and that was the one. If you watch Dana White Contender Series, that was the fight where immediately after he looks at Dana and he's like, "Hey, do I get a contract?" And Dana immediately is like, "Yes, yes, sign, yes." So I thought that was pretty cool in the moment. But in terms of Alan Cruz, he's super long. He's 6 feet tall for this division. He's really tall. He's got super long limbs. He's really rangy. But I'm not completely convinced that he's very smart with using his range. I mean, he does throw a lot of kicks, but I notice, some of them he's just throwing just to throw them. He doesn't throw them with conviction. And that's where I kind of worry with a smaller guy like Spike Carlisle, who's only 5'7". He's shorter, built kind of like a brick. He's a short, stocky dude, stocky build. If he's able to close the distance, if Cruz doesn't keep that range, then I think that's where Carlisle can really have some success here. Because I mentioned he's a lot shorter, but he's very, very strong. And his only professional loss was a split decision in 2018. And since then, he's riding a 4-fight win streak. He also owns 2 wins by rear naked choke, which I think could play a factor here if he gets his fight to the mat, if Cruz gives up his back. Um, And he does have a tendency to do that. So I expect Carlisle to look to close the distance, use that wrestling advantage, land takedowns. I believe he is the better grappler, and that I think is his best path to victory here. He's coming off two straight knockout wins, so I mean it's not like he's lost on the feet. He does have some power in his hands as well. Overall, I just think this could be a really fun fight. We saw the Cruz win fight on Contender Series. It was a good back and forth battle. I can see this one playing out pretty similarly. And if Carlisle can avoid the big head kick or the big knee, then I think he should be able to execute his game plan, close the distance, and land those takedowns, and even potentially get a finish here. I'm not super impressed with Cruz's grappling skills, and really his striking. It's decent, but it's nothing to write home about. And I think just because he had that flying knee victory, I think this betting line's inflated. So give me the plus money on the Alpha Ginger in Spike Carlisle. He's one of my favorite underdogs on DraftKings, and this is a card with a lot of underdogs. So he's just one of the 3 or 4 underdogs that I have a lot of interest in, just because I think if he does win, he's going to score well, and he's cheap enough to where he probably ends up on the optimal. So I'm on Carlisle here, and Carlisle by submission is the official pick. I mentioned DraftKings. Elon Cruz is, I believe, 8,900. We'll pull up the price on DraftKings here. Yeah, he's 8,900. Spike Carlisle 7,300. So yeah, I mean, like I said, if he wins even a decision, he's probably scoring 80 plus points, which is enough at 7.3K. So I'm on Carlisle. I like the plus money. I like the bet. That's going to be one of the plays I have in action. All right. Up next on the card, we have Jordan Griffin versus TJ Brown. Jordan Griffin coming in as the minus 130 favorite. That's actually moved. It was minus 140 earlier today, and now it is down to minus 130. The comeback on TJ Brown is plus 110. This fight as a whole is minus 110, not to go to decision. The inside distance line for both fighters, Griffin wins inside distance is plus 246. Brown is plus 300. This one is interesting. We have another guy coming off Dana White Contender Series in TJ Brown. He won by submission in the third round with an arm triangle choke. And that was the fight where he actually, I thought he did not look very good in that fight. And I think he's definitely overvalued right now just because Jordan Griffin, A, is more experienced, but B, I just think Jordan Griffin is more talented basically everywhere this fight goes. I really do. TJ Brown was dropped like I I think he might have chin issues. He's been knocked out before. He was dropped immediately in that Contender Series fight, and he recovered, sure, but nearly got caught in an armbar right after. And then a few minutes later, he has his opponent completely grounded on his knees, and he lands a big knee to the temple. So he got a point deducted for that. He didn't look good to me. And he ended up getting the finish, but honestly, like overall, I wasn't super impressed. He's a capable wrestler. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So clearly that's his best path to victory. And like I said, he wasn't impressive in the striking department. So he's going to want to take Griffin down. He's going to want to grapple. And he has some decent scrambling, but Griffin is very well rounded, and he already has 2 UFC fights under his belt. Now, granted, he lost both of those, but he was facing Dan Ige and Chaz Skelly, who are both excellent grapplers and pretty decent competition. So I think when it comes to the advantage here, I think Griffin has the advantage on the feet. I think he's definitely the more technical striker and the more powerful striker, and I think it's possible that he gets a finish. He talked about in his last fight how he was so aggravated that he gave up that fight to Dan Ige, which is nothing to be ashamed of, and said he wanted to come out and get a finish against Skelly. Didn't get the finish, came close a couple times, and now I just feel like he thinks his back's against the wall. And it's similar to that Julian Paiva fight from a couple weeks ago, where his record's maybe 0-2, but he's a lot better than his record actually shows. And that's what I think we have in Jordan Griffin right now. He's an experienced purple belt in BJJ, so it's not like the grappling is a disadvantage as well. So he was able to get himself out of some compromising positions against Skelly. So I'm not exactly too worried about TJ Brown's grappling. And I just think he pieces them up on the feet. I think he's the better, more experienced, well-rounded fighter, and I think that shows off here, despite what the betting odds show. I think this should actually be closer to a 2-1 favorite, and it's not even close to that right now. So I like the bet on Jordan Griffin, and I think we could potentially see a finish. So Griffin by knockout is the official pick, and I like the bet as well. All right, next fight up on the card is going to be, they have it listed on Best Fight Odds. We'll go with that one. Marcin Tybura versus Sergey Spivak. Spivak, the minus 120 favorite. The comeback on Tybura is plus 100. This fight as a whole is minus 4. Sorry, they took it down. Huh. It was like minus 350 or minus 375. Something like that. Yeah, I wonder why they took it down. That's interesting. The inside distance line for Tybura is plus 260, and they don't have the props on Spivak either. So it looks like they froze some of those for some reason. But yeah, so Spivak's the slight favorite here in this one. I think that's about right. I actually favor Spivak a little bit more, just because, Tybura is obviously the veteran. He's a black belt, but it just seems like his best days are definitely behind him. He's lost 4 of his last 5 fights. The only win during that span was against Stefan Struve. And if you know anything about Stefan Struve, at that time he had one leg out the door. He was battling some personal issues, stopped fighting. Now he came back and is fighting again. But at the time, he wasn't. That's not a very impressive win, is what I'm trying to say. So losing 4 of his last 5 and his only win against Stefan Struve, not very impressive. Along with that, he's coming off 2 straight knockout losses. And his opponent, Spivak, he has power in his hands. I think he could really make this 3 in a row for knockout losses for Tybura. And I mentioned Tybura is a black belt, but Spivak owns 6 submission wins himself. So he should be capable of defending himself on the mat if it goes there. But I don't think it really will, because in a heavyweight fight like this, I'm almost always betting on the more durable fighter, which is definitely Spivak. He's only been knocked out once, and that was by Walt Harris. And Walt Harris, let's be honest, he knocks everybody out. So I'm not going to fault Spivak too much for that. That was his only time being finished, and none of his fights have ever reached the 3rd round. So this should be a decent fight to target on DraftKings either way. I think Spivak does put away Tybura, and I think it comes in the 1st or 2nd round. So in that aspect, I think he's a good tournament play on DraftKings. Spivak by knockout is the official pick. In terms of DraftKings pricing, we'll take a look here quick before we move on. Spivak is 8,200 and Tybura is 8K. So I'm going to be heavy on Spivak just because I think regardless, this fight's going to score really well. But I think he's going to get the knockout win. And if that happens and he scores, against Tai Tuivasa, he got a 2nd round finish, landed 6 takedowns. I don't see that happening. 6 advances, scored 130 points. That's a little excessive. But if he gets a knockout win at 8,200 in the 1st or 2nd round, he's going to end up on the optimal lineup. And I think I'm pretty confident that that is the outcome in this one. So he's going to be one of my favorite plays on DraftKings in all formats, and I feel pretty good about it. Next fight up on the card is going to be Louise Pena versus Steve Garcia. And this one I'm excited for. I love Violent Bob Ross. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch. I like his style. I really like him. I like his story. I like everything about him. And it looks like Best Fight Odds is showing minus 285 favorite for Pena. Come back on Steve Garcia plus 225. I think that's a little steep. I've seen some people on MMA Twitter cap it at like minus 150 Pena. I think that's a little low. I think it should be somewhere in the middle of both of those, maybe minus 175, something like that. But I do think he is the rightful favorite. I expect him to basically show that he is the rightful favorite with the experience. I think he's the more technical fighter. Garcia is on a 4-fight win streak. He also fought on Dana White Contender Series this past summer. He earned a TKO victory, but was not awarded a contract because he missed weight for that fight. That fight was at bantamweight. Now he's moving up to lightweight here on short notice. And a big advantage that he had at bantamweight was his size, right? Like he's 6 feet tall. He's strong for that division. In that Contender Series fight, he just kind of ragdolled his opponent because he was so much bigger. That's not going to happen against Louise Pena. He also had a significant grappling advantage, and I expect him to use that to try to use that in this matchup. But the only negative about the thing about Louis Pena is he's 6'3", so that size advantage that Garcia has really goes away against Louis Pena, and Pena's the more experienced fighter with 4 fights in the UFC. I know Garcia has more professional fights, but Pena's fighting at a higher level. And he also has the grappling advantage against Garcia. And I think that makes the difference here. The only real negative about Pena is that he's not super active in terms of DraftKings. He's a slow starter. If you watch him, he trains out of AKA. He's very patient. He's smart, but he's not super aggressive. So, a lot of times, especially in the first round, he's pumping out that jab, but it's really just a feeler to find his range. So he's not necessarily trying to land right away. And as the fight goes on, especially in the second and third rounds, he starts to pick it up. So, and we love to see, a smart fighter who's able to adapt over the course of 3 rounds. But in terms of DraftKings, we don't love to see that because we want someone who starts fast. We want someone who's super active, and he really doesn't do that. So it'll be interesting. Steve Garcia generally starts pretty fast. If he takes the fight to Pena and pushes a fast pace in this one, then maybe Pena's forced into a back and forth affair. But because of that low volume, he really needs the wrestling and grappling upside in terms to pay off his DraftKings salary. And I do think he's able to execute that game plan. So I do have some interest there, but he is expensive. He's 9.1K on DraftKings, I believe. And let's see here. Pena. Why can't I find Pena? Violent Bob Ross. Where are you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Huh. I don't know. He's not showing up on here. Okay. I guess they temporarily removed him, even though that fight's official. I swear he was 9.1K, but he's not showing up for. Oh, there it is. I guess I'm blind. All right. 9.2K is what he has. I apologize. And then that's who's not showing up is his opponent. Steve Garcia is probably going to be around 7K. That's where Munoz was before he was yanked from the card. But as you can see with Pena, he does have the type of upside against Wyman. He got the third round finish, 7 advances, scored 120. But in the losses against Trezano, only 25 points. The loss against Frivola, I thought he won that fight, only 49 points. At 9.2K, the problem is that is expensive. He pretty much has to get those advances and those takedowns. So I think he's in the mix, but definitely not a core play for me just because he's a little bit too expensive for my liking. All right, next fight up on the card is my boy Brendan Allin Allen versus Tom Breeze. Breeze is the minus 135 favorite to come back on Allen, plus 115. This fight as a whole, not to go to decision, minus 155. The inside distance line on Breeze is plus 172. And that is actually, okay, so when I checked, it was plus 195. It's actually gone back to its open at plus 172. Allen inside distance line, plus 265. And these guys are both priced in the mid-range. So I think this is a fight we definitely have to have some interest in. but it's not super simple to break down. And I'll get into why here in a minute. But basically, in terms of talent, Tom Breeze, he has all the tools. He's a southpaw, he's a good boxer, he's got quick hands, he's got a nice jab, and he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His only professional loss was a split decision against Sean Strickland. However, since that loss, he took 2 years off and then fought the corpse of Daniel Kelly in May of 2018, which he won by first round knockout, which was really like a first round eye scrape knockout, sort of. And Daniel Kelly was like 42 years old at the time. Like, it was just, I mean, he had no business being in the UFC. I'm not super impressed with that. So it's tough because we really don't know where Tom Breeze is at. And, he fought once in nearly 4 years. So, and aside from that, he's backed out of multiple fights. If you know anything about his history, he's backed out of multiple fights due to anxiety and personal reasons. So just all those factors in general kind of make him a pretty big question mark, despite him being so talented. We just don't know what type of version of him we're going to get. And so that's where it gets tricky here. But Brendan Allen coming off the second round submission victory against Kevin Holland in his UFC debut. I mentioned I'm a fan of Brendan Allen. I love his story. He's got a brother who's a veteran that got injured, and in his last fight, he just wanted the fight bonus just so he could buy his brother some type of special chair that helps him move around, because I believe he is paralyzed from the neck down. So it's a great story. I'm a big fan of Brendan Allen. I hope he does well in the UFC. Trains out of Roufusport. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's not a terrible striker, but to me, it's pretty obvious that he's only striking to close the distance or to create opportunities for his takedowns and grappling, because that's where he feels more comfortable. Even against Kevin Holland, we kind of saw him give up takedowns on purpose, pull guard a little bit, because he wants to be on the mat. He wants to be grappling. And he's coming in here with a 5-fight win streak. He's never been knocked out. He's a tough dude. But all the things I said about Breeze are tough to ignore. And I think that's why I lean Breeze here. It's not a strong lean, but I think, with all those question marks with the narrative, only one fight in 4 years, the anxiety, the personal issues, I think it's really tough to like quantify those things. So we kind of have to treat them like, we kind of not ignore them, but we kind of just can't really factor them in here too much. So just in terms of like talent, I have to lean Breeze. And like I said, it's not a strong lean. I love Brandon Allen. I think he has a pretty bright future as well. But I just think Breeze is the better striker. He's at least the same level of grappling, if not better grappler. So the only thing Brendan Allen really has going for him here is the wrestling. So I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a competitive fight, and they are both priced affordably in the mid-range. So I'll have both sides on DraftKings, and I think the winner, regardless, has a good chance to end up on the optimal lineup, because it could end in a finish. And even if it doesn't, I think there'll be enough grappling exchange, enough activity to where they can pay off their salary. But Breeze by decision is the official pick, and we can move on. Next fight up on the card, Gabriel Silva versus Kyler Phillips. This is the last one on the prelims. And Silva comes in at minus 125 favorite to come back on Phillips plus 105. This fight to go to decision is minus 170. And that alone makes me not have a ton of interest here, although both guys are pretty affordable, priced in the mid-range. I think this one's just pretty straightforward. We have two up-and-coming prospects, and it's the classic striker versus wrestler stylistic clash. Silva is coming off his UFC debut loss to Ray Borg. In that one, he was basically out-wrestled and grappled for 15 minutes, but it's completely understandable. We just saw Ray Borg look absolutely dominant his last time out. He's an excellent wrestler and grappler, so I'm not going to fault Silva too much for that one. And I basically see it being the other way around here. I think Silva has a really significant wrestling advantage. I expect him to use that advantage in this one against Phillips, who's basically at this point just a knockout or bust fighter making his UFC debut. So Silva by decision is the official pick. But like I said, I don't have a ton of interest on DraftKings because I expect it to be a not necessarily a low scoring decision, but I expect it to be Silva wins by decision and, maybe meets or slightly bust value. I don't really see this one being super high scoring. Um, yeah. So overall, just an underweight stance for me. And if you have a different lean on that one, let me know. Moving on to the main card, we have Grant Dawson versus Derek Minner. And Dawson's a massive 470 favorite here and against Derek Minner, who's making his UFC debut. He's a short notice replacement. He's a veteran regional grinder, basically. He's got some decent grappling, but that's pretty much it. And, plus 375 underdog here. I mentioned already there's a few underdogs that I like on this card. There's really just no need to take a risk on him. Grant Dawson currently has the best inside distance line on the slate. Open at minus 141, all the way down to minus 245. That's very, very strong. We don't see that super often, maybe in some heavyweight fights and main events, but that is very strong for a 3-round fight. Minus 245 inside distance line. He's 9.3K, but with that type of inside distance line, it really is worth it. And against a guy who I don't see really having anything to stop Dawson in Minner, I'm I'm on Dawson here. I think everybody's on Dawson. Probably going to be one of the more popular plays on the entire slate. Dawson by knockout or by TKO is the official pick. Next fight up on the card, Megan Anderson versus Norma Dumont. And Megan Anderson, minus 230 favorite to come back on Dumont is plus 190. This fight not to go to decision is minus 205. Megan Anderson, actually, her inside distance line money's coming in because even earlier tonight it was plus 105. It is dropped now to minus 103. So Vegas is expecting a finish here from Megan Anderson. I wouldn't be super shocked. I do think this one's pretty straightforward. I think Megan Anderson cruises here, but when I originally capped this fight, I think her inside distance line is a little bit inflated, and I think that's because her last 3 fights ended in the first round, and her opponent, Norma Dumont, making her UFC debut, fights out of Brazil. She's a black belt in Sanda, which is basically a mix of kung fu and grappling and self-defense. She's got some decent hands, but overall she's very green. She only has 4 professional fights. I mentioned she fights out of Brazil. I just expect Anderson to be the much bigger fighter, the much stronger fighter, and to use that length, those long legs, those head kicks, to use that range as an advantage. Additionally, she's a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She should be the stronger fighter in the clinch. So I really just see Anderson having pretty much all the advantages here in this one. Anderson by decision is my official pick, but I wouldn't be shocked if she did get the finish. I just think, like I said, the betting, her inside distance line, I think is inflated a little bit due to those recent finishes. So overall, I'll be underweight on DraftKings because at 9.1K, she really does need that finish, especially when we have Grant Dawson next to her and some other cheaper guys below her that I think have a better chance of finishing. So overall, I'll be slightly underweight, but I do lean Megan Anderson. I like the bet more than I like to play on DraftKings. All right, people's main event. We have Ian Kutalaba versus Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev minus 230 favorite. The comeback on Kutalaba is plus 190. This fight not to go to decision is minus 225. Ankalaev wins inside the distance plus 130. And Kutalaba wins inside the distance plus 250. I think there's actually a little bit of value on that line. Kutalaba has a ton of first round knockout wins. So if he does win, it is likely coming in the first round by knockout. So at plus 250, I'm willing to take a poke at that. I like that bet a decent amount. But in terms of the matchup here, I think this one's just going to be a ton of fun. Ankalaev is a Sambo fighter. Actually, both guys are Sambo fighters. Ankalaev's only professional loss was the last second Hail Mary submission by Paul Craig. Since then, he's on a 3-fight win streak, finishing 2 of those inside the distance. I mentioned Kuta, obviously an excellent finisher. It typically comes early. 13 of his 15 professional wins have come in the first round. Yes, I said that. 13 of his 15 wins have come in the first round. Let that sink in. That means this is the exact type of underdog that you want to target. When people talk to me about MMA strategy, this is what it boils down to. When you have an underdog and a plus 190 underdog, that tells me a lot of people don't think he's capable of winning, which is good because it should keep his ownership in check. But these type of fighters who, if they win, you know what way it's coming. The only way he wins here is by a first round knockout. These are the exact type of underdogs to target because you know if they come through, then they're a lock for the optimal lineup. They're going to score 90 plus points and they're going to be on the optimal lineup, and you have to have them to win. So this is the exact type of underdog that I like to target. Is Ian Kutalaba. He's obviously boomer bust, GPP option. Like I said, if he wins, it's coming first round knockout. The problem though, like I wouldn't play him in every lineup. Ankalaev's never been finished. And I think the most likely outcome, or sorry, he's never been knocked out. He's been finished against Paul Craig in that submission that I talked about, but he's never been knocked out. And I think the most likely outcome is that he weathers the storm in Kutalaba. You know, Kutalaba calls himself the Hulk. He comes out with the Hulk paint at weigh-ins, and he comes out just like the Hulk in the first round. But the problem is he gasses after that, and that's why he's first round finish or bust because he gasses after that. So I think if Ankalaev could weather that first round Hulk storm, then I think he could probably get a finish in the second or third round. And I think that's the most likely outcome. So as much as I love Kutalaba as an underdog, I'll have both sides on DraftKings because I think it does end in a finish. And so I'm going Ankalaev here. But like I said, I'll have both sides. This is definitely a live bet situation where if Kutalaba doesn't get that first round finish, then as soon as the end of the first bell rings, or even with maybe 5 seconds left, if you think he's not going to get the finish, that's where I'm going to hammer Ankalaev because I am pretty confident that in the second and third rounds, that's where he will take over in this fight. But overall, it should be a fun one. I'm definitely excited for it. Always a show when Kutalaba is in the octagon. Next fight up on the card is the co-main event, Felicia Spencer versus Zarah Ferran. And honestly, I'm a little confused at this one. Not in terms of the matchmaking. I get it. The women's featherweight division is so, they lack depth. You know, there's basically nobody there. So that makes sense. But where I'm confused is why this is the co-main event. You know, Felicia Spencer's an 800, minus 800 favorite here. The comeback on fairness plus 550. So why is this a main event on a card where we actually have like some exciting fights that we want to see here? So I don't know. It's kind of confusing to me, but I don't get paid to do the matchmaking. So yeah, I have no idea. But Spencer's was tied with Dawson for the best inside distance line. I think Dawson's jumped ahead. Yeah, Spencer wins inside the distance minus 210. Still a really strong inside distance line there, but she's the most expensive fighter on DraftKings at 9.4K. There really isn't much to say about this one. You know, Ferran made her UFC debut against Megan Anderson. She got submitted in the very first round, and Spencer's a black belt. She's a better grappler than Megan Anderson. I mentioned Megan Anderson's a purple belt. I just think she makes easy work of Ferran here. That's why I think it's just kind of a boring main event. I think the fact that this is the matchup that they're pumping up speaks to that lack of depth in the division. But I don't get why they pick this as the co-main. That really kind of bothers me. But I have no interest in laying the 8-1 on Spencer, but I do think she gets the sub here. So she likely scores pretty well. Spencer by submission is the official pick. 9.4K is a little steep on DraftKings, but if she gets the early sub and lands some advances as well, then she will score pretty well on DraftKings. All right, the main event. We have Joseph Benavidez versus Davison Figueredo. Benavidez comes into this one as the minus 145 favorite. The comeback on Figueredo is plus 125. Oh, what's going on here, computer? Oh, there we go. This fight doesn't go to decision, plus 130. The inside distance line for Benavidez, plus 285. Inside distance line for Figueredo is plus 365. And it's the same old story with Figueredo. He doesn't land in volume, but he's super powerful for this division. So he owns a ton of knockouts at the flyweight level, which is pretty nice to see. But he's usually not throwing in volume, so he's waiting for that big power shot. So the problem with that is if he doesn't land that big power shot, then he's probably busting his price or losing a decision and not scoring well. So I think his best path to victory is obviously hurting Benavidez with something heavy. I think Benavidez will look to land the takedowns, out wrestle Figueredo, and basically try to take some wind out of his sails. And I think that is the most likely outcome. I could see him landing those takedowns, tiring out Figueredo over the course of 5 rounds, especially in the later rounds. I think that could pay off for Benavidez. Benavidez by decision is the official pick. But Figueredo is another dog. You know, I mentioned there's so many underdogs on this card. Sean Brady, Spike Carlisle, Ian Kutalaba, and now Figueredo, where all of these guys have a realistic path to victory. And all of them not only could win, but if they win, they're going to score very well. So even though I think Benavidez by decision is the most likely outcome, I'm not overlooking Figueredo here because I think he's too cheap. You know, at 7.4K, we're getting some odds value at plus 125. But also, if he wins, then it's probably coming by a finish. So if he finishes him inside the distance at 7.4K, then he's probably going to score pretty well and has a good chance to land up on the optimal. So the only thing I will say about this is I don't think this is a main event where you absolutely have to have um, the main event in every single lineup. You know, if you're playing 10 lineups, maybe have exposure to this one in 8, and then maybe in 2 have neither, just because I think there are going to be a decent amount of finishes on this card. And we've seen these guys when they do go the distance, if they don't land in volume, then they might not score that well. But I'll have exposure to both sides, slight lean towards Benavidez because I think he does win a decision. But like I said, Figueredo is definitely in the mix as a live dog. And Benavidez, you know, not that long ago, we were talking about him as primarily just a decision fighter who scores 60 to 70 points. Like, look at all these fights previously 54, 63, 65, 40. That was a loss. But his past 3 fights, they haven't been like that. 2 of his past 3 fights, he's knocking people out. And then the other one against Dustin Ortiz landed 7 takedowns, 2 advances. So it's 3 fights in a row where he scored over 100 points. So he definitely has the upside. 8,800, he needs some of those points, whereas Figueredo pretty much just needs to win. But like I said, I mean, I'll have pieces of both. The pick is Benavidez. Overall, should be a fun flyweight scrap. And that pretty much wraps up the card. Any questions, get them in the chat now. I will go over my favorite bets once again and recap before we get out of here. All right. Let me go back to best fight odds. All right, so some of my favorite bets for this card, I like Sean Brady at plus 105. I like Brady by decision. If you can get the decision prop, that's even better. And he is kind of a decision machine. So let's see, Brady by decision is plus 185. So I actually like that quite a bit. Instead of just betting him straight up at plus 105, I'd probably hit the plus 185 on Sean Brady. I like him. I like Spike Carlisle as an underdog at plus 160. I wouldn't bet a prop on him. I would just take the money line because I think he does have multiple paths to victory. I think he could win a decision or a submission. So I like that bet as another underdog as well. I like Jordan Griffin at minus 130 over TJ Brown. I think that line is due to recency bias, Jordan Griffin being 0-2 in the UFC. I think his back's against the wall. I think he's the better, more experienced fighter. And I think that shows here, minus 130. I'm pretty confident. Like I said in my breakdown, I think that should actually be closer to 2-1 in favor of Griffin. So that's one of my more confident bets on the entire card. Um, let's see. Other than that, yeah, I really like the early prelims, especially for bets for sure. Other than that, um I like Ian Kutalaba, his inside distance line, plus 250 I mentioned. I think, yeah, you can get him even better by knockout plus 275 for Kutalaba. I think there's a good amount of value there just because, like I said, if he does win, it's coming in the first round. So I like that bet a lot. And that is pretty much it in terms of bet. I'm going to be mixing those into a bunch of parlays, maybe with some other ones that I don't feel as confident in. But we'll see as we get closer to Saturday. It's only Wednesday night. Things can change. If they do change, I'll have them updated in the article on the website at fightnumbers.com. That will be posted later on tonight. I will also have DraftKings player rankings. I will have ownership projections and line movement updated on the website as well, fightnumbers.com. If you don't already, please press the heart button on my channel. I'm trying to get to 50 Twitch followers. I'm at 42. Any support is greatly appreciated. On top of that, we are also on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify. If you prefer to listen to a podcast like I do, I listen to many podcasts. So some people prefer the audio version instead of the video. We have that as well. Fight Numbers, it's in iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. Check it out. We're on YouTube as well. All of that stuff can be found on my website at fightnumbers.com, completely free of charge. Costs you absolutely nothing. So you really have nothing to lose and no excuse. So good luck this weekend, guys. UFC Norfolk. I'm super excited about it. Any questions about the breakdown or if anything comes up as we get closer to fight night on Saturday, feel free to hit me up on any social media at John Kelly DFS, and I will do my best to get back to you. But good luck, and we will see you next week.